this is Ashley, and today we're going to be going through food prep. Now today we're going to do the food prep for the whole week for the 200-pound active male. So that includes all the recipes that we went over. I already started the pot roast since that takes a little while, but basically you just take the pot roast in, put a few cups of beef stock, a few cups of water, and any seasonings that you like, and just set it in the crock pot for 4 to 5 hours. Next one we're going to start with is the chicken. So I'm going to make my little seasoning for the chicken first. I've got my brown sugar here. I don't measure quite exactly since I've done it so often before, but you can measure out with a tablespoon if you like. Put pepper in there. My garlic and herb no salt seasoning. I don't like to add a ton of extra salt or sodium. So if you're watching that, you can always get the no salt added seasonings. Onion powder. I do add a little bit of garlic salt just because this person really likes garlic. Put those away. I like to continue to have a clean workstation. Now I'm using a little bit of thyme and then just a touch of cayenne pepper. This person also doesn't like too much spice. There we go. And I'm going to mix in the brown sugar with those spices. Now the brown sugar with the chicken, you don't have to use brown sugar. You can use a different sugar. There's the palm sugar that has a really low glycemic index. This person doesn't happen to have diabetes, but we like to keep it low sugar. But for just a glaze on the chicken, the brown sugar does help to keep the chicken really nice and moist, which is why I use it. All right, so now my seasoning is done. Out of the way. I'm going to pound the chicken on my cutting board using the flat side of my little meat mallet here. You can always use a rolling pin or anything else. And before I start to do that, I'm going to remember to set the oven to 425. So that's going to start to preheat while I do my chicken. Now to protect the cutting board, I always put down a nice big sheet of plastic wrap. That way you don't have to worry as much about the raw chicken. Before I do that, before I touch anything, you didn't see me do it, but I'll do it again now. I'm going to wash my hands really good. I'll practice safety first. And after touching the raw chicken as well, I like to keep washing my hands. So I don't contaminate anything. I usually just touch the chicken with one hand. And then leave the other hand free. So my chicken has been defrosted. Just gonna reach in. So you see how the chicken has a thin side and then it's got a thick side. So we're gonna pound that out to be more even so it cooks evenly. And we're not left with any spots that are really overcooked. Usually I go to about 2 centimeters, so usually ends up pounding out pretty quickly. And for 6 days for the week, I do 4 chicken breasts. And some of them, sometimes, they're a bit bigger than others, they're a little bit fatter, but overall, when you weigh it out, about 4 chickens breasts worth is the equivalent of, when you divide it up into 6, about 50 grams of protein, which makes for 1 full serving. Again, I touched the raw chicken, so I'm going to wash my hands again really well. plastic wrap over top so I don't pound the chicken spots anywhere else. Here. We've got a nice top and bottom, and then the fun part, pounding out the chicken. So, over here. So see, when it's not frozen, when it's fully defrosted, it pounds out pretty quick, pretty easy. And if you get tired, you can always switch hands. Do a little eye visual. Does all the chicken look about even? It does. Great. Nothing has gone through the plastic wrap, so your mallet is fine, but I still wash it off. And with the soap, just to make sure. And then we set it to dry. I've already got my baking pan with my parchment paper. Here, take out my olive oil. Is that ready? So again, just using the one hand to touch the raw chicken, so one hand stays free. Place the chicken on the parchment paper. Plastic wrap over to grab. That way you roll it up, nothing on the cutting board. And we're going to drizzle the chicken with the olive oil just a teeny bit. That so you can see, as I rub the olive oil in, it's going to help the seasoning stick. And then just take my seasoning over, rub it into the chicken. Around the edges, and on to the next. And this is just a recipe that I picked up on the internet. The seasonings all kind of are just based on your own personal preference. So if you do find a recipe or you use this recipe, you don't have to stick to it exactly. You can put in what you like. If you like spicier food, or like I said, you don't have to use the brown sugar. You can use palm sugar or something. It's going to brown up just as nicely, nice and brown. And you can always experiment with different recipes for the week too. I know some of my friends prefer to make burritos and freeze them and just heat them up. This particular person usually eats his meals on the road, which is why all of these recipes for today are things that can just be eaten cold. I'm going to flip to the other side. Here the oven continuing to heat up. Probably should have turned it on just a tad earlier. And then a little bit of olive oil on the side. Let's see, I usually just eyeball it. But you can always measure it out if that makes you happier. Just do what you're comfortable with. And again, same thing on both sides. So I'm not speeding up this video. No, I guess I should have taken note of the time when we started, but basically the purpose of this video is to show you that things can be prepped for the whole week in a decent amount of time. And you can do that, you know, with different recipes. They may be different times. This is just what I've found works for me. And this particular individual likes the same things every week, so I get it pretty easy. I'm going to touch my bowl here. It's going to go right into the sink after, just to make sure I get all of that seasoning. And like I said, too, the pot roast usually takes the longest, but you can stick that in before you leave for work for the day, or anytime if you're doing food prep on a weekend. You usually can go out and about and do other things and enjoy your weekend. Or like me, if you're doing food prep during the week, then you just carve out the time that you need. Usually takes me, I don't know, under an hour to prep for the whole week. So we'll watch the time, see if that's make it accurate today, or if my talking makes it a little longer, which is fine. I have time today. But yeah, if you can make all your food generally within about an hour, do it pretty good. I'm gonna wash my hands really good. I'm actually going to leave it out because I'm going to use it for our tuna recipe. It's 370, so it's almost there. I like to keep things clean as I go. Go. So we'll move the chicken here. And got our cutting board. So then while the chicken goes, I usually like to start on my other dishes. So for the pico de gallo, you can get one of these pre-done containers at most stores, pico de gallo. For this particular individual who likes this recipe, they don't like the jalapeno that they put in there. So because of that, I just make it on my own. I don't like to cut onions, so I just get the pre-diced. But it doesn't take long to cut onions. So you can always do that. But for 6 servings, I do 1 thing of the pre-cut onions. For these little guys, these little fine tomatoes. Wash off. And then with tomatoes, it's really important to have a sharp knife. My knife, got my little knife sharpener. Do it over here. openers, they usually have a coarse and a fine. I usually do 10 swipes of each, especially before I cut tomatoes. And then I always make sure clean my knife really well. And I'm ready to go. So I'm going to stick the chicken in the oven first since it's right on time. Always be careful of the hot oven. There we go. A large chicken breast like this is going to take about 16 minutes. I'm going to set the timer on here. So that's going to be going while I do my pico. So then we're just going to dice the tomatoes while that's going. That's just the sound of the baking tray. Sometimes they make noise and change a little shape. That particular one is quite old, so it changes shape a little more often. Always when you're slicing, have the fingertips in when you cut. I don't have a bunch of tips and tricks for the kitchen. I do know a few safety precautions, so we'll stick with those. And pico is a really simple recipe. If you don't like shrimp or you don't like those little bay shrimp, you can add any type of shrimp. You can add any type of seafood. You can make it with chicken instead, with turkey, any type of protein, but the pico is a good base. And I like this one because this particular individual, his food that he'll never be able to give up, that he always has to have during the week, is those corn tortilla chips. So he loves those. So this is a great recipe to where you can eat this one with the tortilla chips. And you've got your healthy fat from the protein source. And you've got your carbohydrates from all the veggies and from the chips. And of course you've got your protein from the protein source. So for this particular recipe, for the week, about 6 servings is one of those full containers of shrimp from Costco. So it's about 32 ounces, and I divide it into 6. And I'll show you the container after this, because I actually like to rinse the shrimp instead of just leaving them in the container. Because every once in a while, those little baby shrimps still have a shell here or there, and we don't want that in there. And the serving size on the container does say 3 ounces, but for this particular individual, as you saw in the meal prepping video, to get up to the amount of protein that this individual likes per carbohydrate, or I should say that his body likes per carbohydrate, we have to do double, so about 6 ounces of shrimp, which is a normal serving of shrimp. And the tomatoes tend to be really juicy, so I like to clean up my workstation. Now we're going to move on to cilantro and lime. If you don't like cilantro, certainly leave it out. I know there's some people that can't stand it. For those of us that can stand it, I usually get 1 bunch for the week, and I use half for this, and I'm going to put half in my other bowl for my tuna recipe. Rinse that off really good. Sometimes with cilantro, you'll get like 1 or 2 leaves that don't look super great, so you can always take those out. Then we're going to dice it. So I usually bunch it up again, fingers in, and then dice it. And it does make a wonderful smell. there's other better ways to do it. But I usually don't have a whole bunch of time. And so I do what works fastest for me. And I don't like the stems. So I usually don't trim too far down into the stems. Now that may look like a lot of cilantro, but that's for 12 servings total. 6 servings here, 6 servings in the other. That in. And I like to make and choose recipes that I can do this with, right? So I don't just have half a bunch of cilantro sitting around. I utilize it in my other recipes. And then my last ingredient for this is going to be my lime. I usually like to leave the little bags here just for any other ingredients or the garbage. I just hand squeeze it, otherwise it can get a little too juicy by the end of the week. I've got my Tupperwares here. And anytime I see a spill, I have a little cilantro juice, I always just wipe that up right away. And then in here, take my spoon and mix it really well. And about 4 big spoonfuls in each Tupperware. Even it out at the end too, if these start to look uneven. Yeah. Chicken's starting to smell pretty good. Got about 9 minutes left. So for those chickens, I usually cook them for 16 minutes on the large one, and then the last 2 to 3 minutes you broil them, so it gets that really nice golden brown coating on the outside. This one, I'm getting tired of scooping. Just do this. And these, what I really like about these containers is on the side here you've got the ounces, so it shows you. So you can either eyeball it, or you can look like, oh yeah, that's about 12 ounces of pico, and you can look at the other ones. If you've got a little bit left over, you don't waste any. That wasn't quite waste, but oops. There we go. Then I like to keep my station clean, so these just go right in the dishwasher. And then these, just put the lid on and stick them in the fridge. So our fridge doesn't have a lot of things that sit around week to week. Everything's pretty fresh. So the whole middle shelf is usually dedicated to this person's food. So all he has to do is reach in. I usually put the pico on one side, the tuna on the other, and then the shrimp in front of the pico so it's easy to see and grab. And then the roast beef and the chicken I put in smaller containers so they're easier to see. There's that for the pico. Got about 7 minutes left. We'll continue on with our tuna recipe. For the tuna. I've already got my cilantro in there. I've got my avocados. Now I just picked these up yesterday, so these ones might be a little hard. Take the little points off. This one I usually use a paring knife. Just a little easier on me. Yeah, these are a little tough. So you usually want avocados with a little bit of give, but these ones are going to be nice and green. Always make sure safety first. When you're getting these out, and then this particular avocado left some of his little pit behind, and we don't want to eat that because it's like eating wood, seedlings. So I dig it out so it does not get in the mix. There's a little on this side. Good. And then very lightly, I usually just pre-slice in here. Now this is probably best to do on the cutting board. And I just make these little cuts. And then I usually don't mush it up too much. You get a nice chunk of avocado in a tuna salad. But if you're more used to tuna salad being like with the mayonnaise, then you can obviously mush it up like guacamole if you prefer that. This individual doesn't care so much, so I do it how I like it. And if he wants it differently, you can always tell me. But especially when the avocados are this solid, we'll say, it's a little more difficult to get them to mush. You probably want to wait just another day. But then they're going to last really well in the fridge for the 6 days. And now the trick with avocado when you make guacamole or anything, to keep it from really browning up, you put lime on it. So you put an acid. So that's why I've got half the lime. So the little tricks to the shopping list and thinking about the recipes, and that all comes with time and practice. You find the recipes that you like, and just try to make the shopping as easy on yourself as you can without wasting. Last avocado. A little bit there. And maybe a little bit there. Make sure that doesn't get in. And then I wash my little paring knife because I'm not going to use it again. And use my spoon to dig out the avocado in there. Now I'm watching my clock. I've got about 3 minutes before I turn the broil on the chicken. So I'm keeping an eye on it. Also with this tuna salad, you can use any seasoning that you like. For this person, they really love garlic, so I stick to that no salt, garlic and herb seasoning. And then yeah, for all of these recipes, yeah, I just try to keep them low sodium. When you make your food at home and you're not buying the prepackaged food or the processed food, you don't have to worry so much about all the sodium. Your body does need a certain amount of sodium. We just don't want it to elevate, especially if you have any problems with kidneys or with kidney failure, or if you are doing dialysis, then you really want to make sure you're keeping your sodium intake low. And if you're not able to make food for yourself, there are a lot of companies out there nowadays that just pre-make and deliver your food for the week right to you, and you can like program in what food that you like, what foods that you don't, what foods that maybe you're allergic to. So you can do all of that. You can do vegan, whatever. And in our complete program, we do all that for you as well. So if you put in your preferences, and we make little meal plans for the week for you, if you would like to do them yourself. So there goes in half a lime. Around a bit. I've got about a minute before I turn it in. So next I'm going to slice my cucumber. The trick with the cucumber in this tuna salad is that it will let off a lot of moisture if you, let's try it. It's fine. Like dice it. So I used to dice it, and now I just do these slices, and that keeps the moisture in the vegetable instead of leaking out. Usually won't leak out until about the 5th or 6th day, but if you come to Friday and Saturday and you're like, oh, that's not as good as it used to be, that's kind of disappointing. So again, keeping the fingers in, dicing it up, and then I'm done with my knife. Oh. And my microwave sings to me, thank you. Now I'm going to check my chicken first, just by eyesight. Turn on the light, look at it, looks pretty nice. So I'm gonna take the bake off, turn it on to broil on high, and I just watch my timer, so it's 12:41 now, so about 43, 44. I'll take it out again to let it sit. Oven mitt. You always want to use oven mitts, especially on broil. It's very hot. You do not want to burn yourself. So always safety in the kitchen. All right. Cutting board. I'm going to wash that off. And I'm done with these. I'm going to keep one of my little bags for the tuna fish containers. I don't like to run to the garbage can each time. So, still watching. It's kind of bubbling. It looks really pretty. Watch on that. There. So I've still got olive oil seasoning, and while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to get out my can of chickpeas. Costco ones have this nice little lid that's super easy to open, yet I still have to use a knife. And with my chickpeas, as well as with my tuna, I'm going to put them over in my strainer and rinse. And you can always do chickpeas from dried as well. All you need to do with the chickpeas, shake them off and in there, is soak them overnight. So it's about 43. We'll check it again. Looking pretty good. Definitely not dry. And one of those was a little bit thicker, so I'm going to leave it in for one more minute. But yes, with the chickpeas, you just soak it overnight. And then these I get at Costco for the whole month. I get 2 of them. There's 12 cans in each. When we looked at the shopping list, the price is not bad. Especially for, you know, a month's worth of recipes. Take out 6 cans. And then back into storage for the rest. always like to clean as I go. Broil. So I'm going to take out my chicken now. And as you will see, there's definitely bits of browning, bits of caramelization. Put that on the edge of the sink, always being careful, always being cautious. Then we're going to take our meat thermometer, turn it on. Chicken should be cooked to an internal temperature of 165. So I usually eyeball and look for my thickest piece of chicken and stick it in till about halfway. You don't want to put it all the way down at the bottom because obviously the pan is going to be very hot. You want correct internal reading of the chicken. It usually takes a while. It's going up and up, 140, 144, 147, 150. So we just keep watching. It was a little smoky in here because of the caramelization, so you can always have the fan going. Just about to 165. I just like to make absolutely sure that it gets there. Perfect. 165. And then I turn it off. Stick it over to dry. And then with these chickens, I usually put them on a plate to get that out. I just take my tongs and let them sit for about, well, you can let them sit for 5 minutes, especially if you're doing this for dinner or something. Sitting for about 5 minutes, that way the juices all stay in there really nice. And it is a really lovely looking little dinner. This individual, like I said, likes to eat things on the road. So I put that over there and then I slice it and put it in individual things. Now this, again, still very hot. And I like to keep things clean. Especially while it's hot and some of the parchment paper may stick a bit. Okay. It will come off when you wash it. You just don't want it down your sink. There we go, and then I take the whole thing. The paper itself doesn't stay hot for very long, so then that you can just throw away. And then while you're over at the can, you can continue to try to get those little crispy spots off. Now I usually would have the fan going, but I'm kind of a quiet talker. So I want you guys to still be able to hear me today. But usually, yes, I would have the fan going. Go. Taking that paper off very carefully. It does get crispy in there. And you just need a little help on sticking. Now you wouldn't scrape with a non-stick pan. Like I said, this pan is super old and it's definitely not non-stick. It is an old hand-me-down, which is great. Those work awesome, especially for things like this. You kind of get it messy whenever you need. paper pieces. Drop my oven mitt on the floor. I'll hang those back up. Wash my tongs. And the tongs I'm going to use to take my pot roast out later too, so I like to keep those out and handy. And last but not least, onto the tuna. So again, these ones come with a handy little thing, so you don't have to use a can opener. Can opener just takes just a little bit longer. But I've used different tunas before, and you cannot tell a difference. So you use the tuna that you like if you're doing this recipe. Super quick. And then for him, I always rinse it too. I don't like a whole lot of sodium, and sometimes when it sits in the can, it can just sit in some sodium. It is a saltwater fish. Just take it out. I put the can in there. On to the next. You want to be careful with some of these because they can be hard to peel off. Could just be that my hands are getting tired. So I do that for each serving is going to get about a full can of tuna. So 6 cans of tuna. Because as we know, for our individual, they like quite a lot of protein, and you're getting a lot of carbs from the chickpeas, a lot of healthy fats from the little bit of olive oil, and from the avocado. And chickpeas are also a good source of protein. They just happen to have a lot of carbohydrates. So if you are doing this recipe where you're just using the chickpeas, or maybe put some lentils in, help make it a little more of a complete protein. If you're doing more of a plant-based diet, absolutely fine. Because with a plant-based diet or even a vegan diet, the ratios are often lower for protein versus carb versus fat for the day. So we looked at that other food prep for the vegan, and that percentage was 25% protein, which is this individual's, again, if you forget, is about 40% protein for the amount of calories. Everybody's body is a little bit different. Everybody's works a little bit differently. If you are an individual who usually runs better on high protein, switching to more of a plant-based diet, you will go down in your protein intake, but you're still getting, as long as you're getting complete proteins throughout the day, your body should be fine. It might just take a little bit of an adjustment period. And there, I'm done with the tuna. I rinse it off. Get all the chunks. Bowl. This might have been a little bit of a small bowl for this. We'll see. And then I'm going to strain out. Because again, we don't want a whole lot of liquid in these because they're going to be sitting. So I shake it off. Strainer, usually wash it. It's hard to get the little chunks out, so I usually wash it in the dishwasher. I have not rinsed and strained my shrimp yet, however. So I'm going to clean it real good. And then then we'll use it to strain the shrimp. So this is almost done. I usually eyeball it again. It's about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And we're done with that. So add those. Use that same garlic and herb, no salt seasoning. Some flavor and just a little bit of pepper. I prefer the fresh cracked pepper, but everybody is different. Oh, spilled. Wipe it up. Make sure my whole space is clean. Don't spilled anymore. Then I've got my 6 Tupperware. I'm going to carefully, well, I just cleaned, so I'm going to put it right back in. This is a home kitchen, not professional. We all make mistakes, but I do know that that countertop is clean since I literally just washed it. So I'll be a little more careful here. Seasoning mixed. I do have a bigger mixer bowl. I'm not sure why I didn't use it. This is not the one I usually use for this particular recipe, but it's what I had sitting on the counter after everything's washed. That's what I used. Right. And then with this one makes, I mean, 1 can of tuna is quite a lot of food, so it does make quite a lot. Gotta make sure we get some cucumber in each one, some chickpeas, a bunch of tuna. And again, with this one, I usually kind of eyeball where it's at, and you can look on the side. That's a pretty decent, it's a pretty big meal. This one can be used really easily as a lunch. If you prefer tuna salad on an actual like sandwich, I would just suggest leaving the chickpeas out and doing the bread, because bread is quite a lot of carbohydrates, so you don't want to overload yourself. So if you're going to do this tuna salad and make sandwiches out of it, just leave the chickpeas out. For the bread, the reason I don't make sandwiches too, because sandwiches are easy to take and eat on the road, and most people really love them, but the reason we don't is this particular person is also gluten-free. So with that in mind, I usually don't bother getting a gluten-free bread. You can. We used to make toast in the morning. You can always switch it up. We might go back to toast. Who knows? But you have to go by likes and dislikes. And oftentimes gluten-free bread doesn't taste quite the same as your regular everyday bread. So we just go without. All of them about even, and then we'll go back if we have extra and add a little more to each one. Now with this one too, I'm doing it spoon by spoon. If I wasn't doing this for a video, I'd probably just line them up and dump it all in. I just want to show you, it can easily be done. You can measure out the spoons if you like. But this is usually the faster way. And then getting that little bit of extra for the ones that look a little shy. off and stick in the dishwasher. And there you have it. Tuna's done. Now I'm going to let that chicken sit for just a bit longer while I rinse out the shrimp. Shrimp, I forgot to take out that Tupperware, so I'll put these in the fridge and grab the Tupperware for the shrimp. The container, if you haven't seen them before at Costco that I get of the little bay shrimp, looks just like that. 32 ounces, less than $12 for the week. So we try to do things on a relative budget around here. Of course, if you're eating more plant-based diet, then things can tend to be a little bit cheaper. Again, you just really have to make sure that you're getting complete proteins with each meal. Oh, and these freeze really well. I usually just let them defrost right along with the chicken and the pot roast in the fridge for the day. Next these out in my strainer, and I'm just going to rinse it and look for shells. Just make sure everything's all good. And it's always nice to get a little rinse off, because especially when they're frozen, these little shrimpies like to stick together pretty easily, as do the big shrimp too. At that point, it looks pretty good. Gone through everything. Now I used to individualize, like go through individually and portion out, like, 6 portions of shrimp. But we're getting less space in the fridge. Just a little bit there. All right, so always good to go back and make sure a second pair of eyes help you out with that one. These little shrimp, it doesn't matter quite so much, but it's never pleasant to bite down on something like that. And usually in one of those packages, there's only like 1, maybe 2. It is not a lot. They do a pretty good job. And then dump right into my Tupperware. They also have these in bags. Those tend to be a little more expensive, but you can do the bagged ones too. And I'm going to rinse that off. Make sure everything's gone there, but I'm going to, like I said before, I'm going to stick my strainer right into the dishwasher, because that's what really gets all those tiny little mesh things fully cleaned. And then 6 servings of shrimp. He usually eyeballs it for the week. Ceviche is done. Tuna is done. I'm going to slice up the chicken, put it, and then got about 3 more hours on the pot roast. So after 3 hours, we'll just slice that up into 6 portions, put it in, and you are done for the week for food prep. So for the chicken and the pot roast, I use these smaller containers. You can use whatever containers fit best, whatever is easiest. Take my chicken over here. Oh, some sauce is drained out. Can be a little messy. And I'm just going to slice my chicken and place it into the containers. And even if you're not a meat eater, if you're trying to go more plant-based, or if you're vegan or vegetarian, this rub also, I always think it smells so good. So I've actually put it on tofu or tempeh before, and it's actually a nice little aside for that as well. So there are things that you can do. Put two in here. If you are more plant-based, this one looks a little smaller than the other, so I'll put it in there. For a lot of these things, I don't weigh out anymore. You can get a scale and make sure that you're weighing out everything really evenly. But once you do it for a while, you kind of just get to know what things look like. And then for these, it's easy. I've got 6 containers, 4 chicken breasts to 6 servings. So I just don't weigh it out anymore. And this one still looks like the other side gets there. And like I said before too, these are just some of the really simple recipes. We've got a lot of other recipes that you can try. Some take longer than others. For this individual, I think we are at about an hour now, since I've been chatting and doing other things. But an hour to prep food for the week is really not a whole lot. If you want to do things that involve more chopping, that's of course going to take a little bit longer, but you can always do that too. It's whatever your preference, whatever you have time for, that's what you're going to stick with, and we want things to be consistent for you. So you always want to go with things that are doable, that are manageable, and that you can keep up with. I was trying to measure these out by eye. I've got 2 more to go here. That's a nice big thick piece. And of course, with all of these recipes too, you always have to account for trial and error. The very first time I made this recipe, I'm not used to cooking meat. I don't eat meat, so I was so afraid of underdoing it that I overdid it, and it was so dry, and it didn't look good, didn't taste very good, I don't think. But then by the second time I did it, it tasted awesome, he said. So that's why I stick with this. Use the meat thermometer. When you use the meat thermometer, you're just really accurate. You know exactly it's been cooked enough. There's no undercooked. Always too, when you take things out and let them sit and rest, they're always going to go up a few more degrees in temperature because they're going to continue to cook just a little bit. But when you take it straight out of the oven, you want the chicken to be 165. Especially since, like I said, this individual does not reheat these. This is just his snack. Now this snack goes with dried cherries or any other type of fruit. I was going to see if I have a bag of the dried cherries. The dried cherries from Costco are usually what I get, but we do have some lovely plums, so he's going to eat those this week with them. He doesn't seem to want brands here. Sometimes you have to look around, see which ones are supposed to go on what. Sometimes lids of different brands work together, sometimes they don't, but we figured it out. And then those go right in their designated spot in the fridge. And that is all for food prep for the 200-pound active male. We have everything done. Breakfasts, I do a tofu scramble in the morning. He has homemade applesauce, which his mom makes, so you can do any sort of unsweetened applesauce in a can. So he has tofu. I use, again, the low-sodium tamari, which is a gluten-free soy sauce. So with any sort of soy, anything, there's always going to be sodium, so you can look at the sodium. Serving size here is 1 tablespoon, and it's 670 milligrams. I just dab a little bit, just sprinkle a little bit. So it's definitely not a tablespoon. I don't even think it's a teaspoon. So it's not a whole lot of sodium in the morning, especially since, as you saw, I'm not adding a whole lot of sodium to any of the other food either. So we keep the sodium intake low. For breakfast in the morning as well, he has a protein shake. Mixes it with almond milk, and that's something he just does every morning. And then I fry up the tofu while I fry up tofu and some sliced vegetable for myself. And then I like to have some fresh fruit. He likes the applesauce, so you can kind of see the differences there, but then also how it works together, where it's pretty easy to do for both. And then for dinner, I have my marinated tempeh, and fry that up. I don't mind. He usually has the salmon patties. I don't mind frying it up in the same frying pan. If you're really, really strict about the vegan diet, you can do it in separate. But salmon has all the good fats and everything. It's usually what runs off, so I don't mind a little bit in my tempeh. And tempeh, for those of you that don't know, it's just another soy product. So if you have a soy allergy, you wouldn't be using tofu or tempeh. But there's definitely a lot of these other recipes that you can use, and you can just substitute out maybe lentils or peas, chickpeas, any other beans. You can mix and match and use any of the food lists that we have. You can mix them and match them so that the recipes really work for you and what you like. I just wanted to show how in about an hour we can food prep for the whole week for an individual. So it's definitely all home cooked. You know what it is, very easy, and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that this helps. You can always skip to different portions in the video. I'll try to time code it a little bit so you can see if you just want to look and see for one recipe. That'll be easier to skip to that part of the video. But thank you so much for watching. It was a joy. Have a great day.